I absolutely adored Spider-Man: Homecoming. I wrote about why it's my favorite Spider-Man film so far already, and I still think that, while the first Tobey Maguire film was great fun, I have to admit I like Holland better in the role, and I enjoyed how the new film let us skip all the Uncle Ben origin story stuff we've seen so many times before. But Homecoming still has its problems. Here are 5 of those, though I imagine you can think of others. 1. A cool suit is one thing, but Spider-Man should have spidey senses. At first I thought the web shooters that Parker has in the film were a little weird. Doesn't Peter Parker have the ability to shoot organic webs out of his wrists? Actually, it turns out that the original Spider-Man in the comics didn't. He had a number of other powers like superhuman strength, balance, and the ability to cling to surfaces, but the web shooters were Parker's invention. Later comics changed this, and the Tobey Maguire films went that route. But there's no set-in-stone right answer. What Spider-Man did have was spidey sense, which gave him sensory powers far outstripping normal humans. But in Homecoming, this is replaced by Iron Man's special suit and its super advanced HUD and AI. I don't like this change. It allows Parker to say stuff like, "I'm nothing without my suit," which is unfortunately at least partly true in this version of the story. Tony Stark wouldn't have been able to offer such a stinging retort if Parker actually did have spidey sense, too. This makes Spider-Man feel more like Kid Iron Man. Such a gadget-centric Spider-Man, replete with a really cool suit that can go into combat mode and interrogation mode, is a fun change, but it also rubs me a bit the wrong way. Partly this is because I want Spider-Man to be able to do all this stuff without a suit involved. The suit is just a costume, whereas Spider-Man's powers come from him. Partly this is also because I don't want Stark doing all the inventing for Peter. Peter's a smart kid, and he's supposed to be able to invent things for himself. Stark may play an almost parental role in this film, and that's fine, but I don't want Spider-Man to become Iron Man Jr. Besides, we've all seen what happens when Stark creates a new AI. We get friggin' Ultron singing nursery rhymes like he's Negan from The Walking Dead. No more AI, Tony Stark. No more. 3. In some ways, it's too much like every other MCU film. This is almost a curse and a blessing. Spider-Man: Homecoming feels very much like a part of the wider Marvel Cinematic Universe. These films all have a certain style and the new Spidey flick fits right in. Of course, that's the way it needs to be as part of a cinematic universe, but it's also a little disappointing. It makes me glad that X-Men remain outside the fold, because that way we get movies like Deadpool and Logan, 2 films that would never ever in a million years be part of the MCU. For better and worse, writes the Daily Beast's Nick Shagger, Marvel has now become the leading proponent of what we might call risk-aversion cinema, an approach to 21st century blockbusterdom that's lucrative precisely because of its unadventurousness. In some ways, this lack of risk-taking, this emphasis on creating some consistency in tone and style, creates something very enjoyable and ensures that, more often than not, you're going to see a very good movie. But at the same time, you rarely get anything truly unexpected, and while I loved Homecoming, in some ways simply because it had such a small stakes conflict, I do wonder if the MCU may be strangling some of the creativity out of Marvel's movies. 4. It creates a major timeline issue for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Speaking of the MCU, it relies on a sometimes confusing timeline of events that spreads across all the films beginning with 2008's Iron Man. Homecoming throws this timeline out of whack. Essentially, the movie states quite clearly that it takes place 8 years after the events of the Avengers. But Captain America: Civil War takes place 8 years after the events in Iron Man, which takes place in 2009, making Civil War 2017, and Homecoming is supposed to take place 6 months after Civil War. So late 2017, early 2018. But The Avengers takes place in 2011 or 2012, which would mean Homecoming would take place in 2019 or 2020, which means that, oh, you get the picture. The timeline is broken at this point, and it's all Spider-Man's fault. Which is fitting, I suppose. Given that's what he does throughout the movie, is he makes every problem he tries to solve worse in the process. 5. Not enough Aunt May. Come on, Marvel. You cast Marissa Tomei as Aunt May and then barely gave her any scenes. Sure, you gave her some good ones, but not enough. I was expecting at least one secret scene with her and Pepper Potts in it. Oh well, at least the film did something new with May's character.